I used to ask myself, is my future actually an oppressor? The conclusion of my question is they are. They're words that want to compare people from being oppressed, but they make God as the true oppressor, letting people feel oppressed, letting people accept the condition, which we think is abhorrent at this case. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we as a congregation disagree with this. But how does that look in our side of the house, right? How does it look? How does it look like in opposition's world, where God is to create a condition? That means you have to accept your condition, ladies and gentlemen. That it is actually defined by God, ladies and gentlemen, and everything is already defined by God. That means you define things as it is, ladies and gentlemen, letting it flow. That means all meaningful act by you is unnecessary, for example. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen, the narrative that they should define is everything has been defined by God and it's all God. But we don't think that's true. Because all the rule that has been given isn't something that is necessary for humanity, right? But what do we want as side of opposition? That means in our side of the house, we don't want to just comfort people. We don't want people to just accept poverty, for example. We don't want them to be comforted that their kind of status, for example, right now, is something that is good. That means inside of the house, we're going to encourage them to fight for good life, for example. Things like receiving wealth, for example, and the destiny to have that is only at you and your hard work defines that, right? We're also okay if these words that we're giving to impoverished group will be leaked to other types of groups. We're okay, but that's not going to be part of the debate. So three things that I talked about in my speech. First, I talked about the principle why precisely it's bad. But second, I talked about why precisely the trade-off with salvation that they're going to offer with you is acceptable. But lastly, how you are going to change the people and why it's precisely better. So let's firstly talk about the principle, right? So what exactly does absolute omniscience stand inside of opposition? That means we see verses saying that God has planned everything, for example, for you, ladies and gentlemen, and that external power has given you the absolute good. That means your condition is what you have to accept, because God knows what is best for you. That means you have to succumb to what currently is given to you, ladies and gentlemen, and in the future, that's what has been planned by God. But why is it bad exactly, right? You have to look how precisely that impoverished people condition looks like. They're most of the time oppressed, ladies and gentlemen, oppressed by things like capitalism that alleviate access of wealth to them, for example, that their condition is so bad, for example, they have to stay in starvation, for example, deprived from what is a good, meaningful life for human, ladies and gentlemen. That starvation, ladies and gentlemen, should not be something that they should accept seemingly, right? But more than that, they're usually people who are oppressed by leaders, for example, ladies and gentlemen, by certain type of groups, but therefore they have that particular condition because leaders have to support them to have that particular condition, right? Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, it's bad. But how does it look like inside of how does this look like into the eyes of these people when God is portrayed as omniscient? Firstly, in extreme cases, they think that in ways that are actually destructive. What are we saying? They thought that their past life, for example, ladies and gentlemen, was evil, that they deserve that particular treatment at the current condition right now, ladies and gentlemen, that therefore they cannot actually, they have to accept what it is. That means they would justify what precisely they're oppressed right now, for example, ladies and gentlemen, thinking that they actually deserve this. Things like they thought that because the past life they were bad, the karma to them right now is something that they should deserve, they should, for example, deserve, right? But B, in the second context, in a softer context, where the value of working might still exist, it is still bad. Why? Because people might try to work, but it won't be maximized, ladies and gentlemen. What are we talking about? That means that they might still work, but they rely on the good and the chance given by God. What are we saying? We're saying that, for example, if what they're trying to do is failing, for example, they would say it's not my fault if I fail, but it's what God has planned. So it's okay if I fail, and I should accept that that's probably not what I'm good at, for example. That's what being wealthy is not probably what God has planned for me. That means inside of opposition, you portray that hard work has limit, ladies and gentlemen, and you shouldn't actually try working because that's not what God has planned for you, right? When you need to repeatedly try to advocate or try to actually work in order to gain the wealth that exists at the concept for, which we think even right now is attainable if you do hard work, because access is already expanded, ladies and gentlemen, and the means to access, for example, is already expanded, right? In this principle, it stands alone that it's actually a bad thing, because these people have to remain being oppressed and they cannot do anything about it rather than to accept it. That's why the first principle stands. But let's talk about the second thing, where precisely it's an okay trade-off, ladies and gentlemen, than just a mere pure salvation that they're going to talk about. But that's, before I proceed, yes.
How does the concept of idolatry go to heaven and hell work in open-theism?
Yeah, it still works the same, just that what we're focusing right here is like the destiny in front of you. You have to achieve it. This has nothing to do with what is good and what is bad, ladies and gentlemen. So it's not something you should be worried about. So let's proceed to like salvation, right? Why is the trade-off okay? So opposition might say that they're going to comfort and that's what people need, right? We think 3 reasons why it is not the case. First reason is because we think religion also has to give pragmatic benefits towards their congregation, right? It's not enough for religion to become a coping mechanism. Why? Because salvation eventually will not alleviate the most urgent need that these human actually need. Because these people will still, for example, feel the starvation, for example, that would be so painful to them, ladies and gentlemen, and therefore, ladies and gentlemen, it hurts these people. But what is most important is that you will have to need to alleviate most urgent needs, because that actually helps you to pray to God even easier, ladies and gentlemen, later if you already actually fulfill your most urgent need, right? So that means religion should not only tell them to convert that their current state is actually okay and what has been planned, ladies and gentlemen, but religion also should actually focus on the pragmatic thing, and I will tell you what precisely we are going to do this in my speech. But secondly, ladies and gentlemen, exactly the pure salvation that they're giving is one that's dangerous. Why? Because pure salvation, in order for opposition to benefit, has to go to the extreme extent to convince these people who actually enjoy what they feel, right? But how does this look like? This looks like things like you saying that it's not meaningful to fight for a world because it's a material thing, ladies and gentlemen. But this is actually bad. This is where the narrative that allows extremism to actually flourish. That they should actually sacrifice themselves, that the world no longer matters, ladies and gentlemen. This is exactly pure salvation. It's actually a bad thing that one from religion should not actually fight for. Therefore, salvation per se is not good. That is in my second subject class. But lastly, why precisely it's good in outside of the house? Because we feel to change, right? But how do we react in outside of the house, where there is meaningful change? That is because, usually, people are impoverished because of their own fault, examples. Things like mismanagement of money, like not calculating the risk of making an SMEs, for example. In outside of the house, we tell you that you shouldn't, because you are the one who finds your destiny, you should be the one calculating these chances, for example, ladies and gentlemen. That if you fail, it's not because God planned you to fail, ladies and gentlemen, but because you have this that you might not actually see. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, outside the house, people are much more pragmatic and has no limit in hard working, right? But more than that, people will not just stay silent when leaders are actually oppressive, because they now do not accept what they are actually feeling, ladies and gentlemen. You get mass movement that actually will create a bigger changes for situation, right? And for that reason, such opposition. Thank you.
Opposition supporting only sign and God. The Alpha and Omega was there in the past, is in the present, and will be in the future. Who know exactly what you will do and have a plan for it. It is okay that free will not exist to a certain extent, even that being part of the heavenly congregation is more than worth it. One quick rebuttal beside government on the idea that we're going to just accept poverty and accept oppression. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but having a plan doesn't mean that you need to be stuck in poverty. Many of God's plan feature stories of rags to riches, ladies and gentlemen. The great King David was a shepherd, the least considered of his father's son. Joseph was a servant boy, and he became the right hand of the Pharaoh. They need to explain why the notion of plan means being done of everything and giving up. Because we know that preachers will be self-defeating, and they will not be nihilistic. They're going to offer greater days ahead, and there is a plan that they're going to pursue. The plan of Joseph and the plan of David, not the plan of giving up and just being done with everything. Two things that I'd like to talk about in my speech for the rebuttals integrated. Number one, why having a clear defined plan is better for the impoverished people. Number two, economic improvement. Why is it this empowerment you need? Let's begin with plans, right? I'm going to divide it into 3 parts. Number one, your life prior. Number two, your life today. And number three, your life after. Let's begin with your life prior. In their side, there's a big question in open-theism. What in the world have you done with your life until you are so poor right now? Because if God is not controlling, if there is no plan from God and it's your choice, then the question is, what is it that you have done that you're so poor? And the problem is, in gentlemen, in their side is that your answer will most probably be self-blaming. Number one, in the best case, you think you are so lazy that you don't use the talents that God has given you. Even in reality, as they themselves agree, that there are capitalism, that right now you blame free will, even though in reality, I can say this is actually a systemic problem. We did at best what happens in their case a self-perpetuating cycle of depression in which you compare yourself to one that's successful and you blame yourself because you cannot access the same success. But secondly, in the worst case scenario, you think that you your sinful ways and gentlemen. Because the narrative is often seen in the Bible and other religious book is reward and punishment. You might think that, oh, you are cursed, or are your parents cursed, that's why you are so poor right now, even though you have done nothing wrong. But nonetheless, what you see in their side is continuously cycle of self-blaming yourself for sins or mistakes that don't even exist. Comparatively, at least in their side, this is not your fault, this is simply part of a bigger and grander plan. Continuing on what happens in your life today, because I think we need to analyze humans. What do humans seek, ladies and gentlemen? We seek two things. Number one, security, and number two, a figure to rely on. Why is this important? Because for humans, in the grander scheme of things, we are meaningless, ladies and gentlemen. We do not know what our purpose for the world is. We do not know where we go, and we do not know whether tomorrow will be better. This is the case for the impoverished people. They do not know whether tonight they will die in hunger or continue living in an impoverished community tomorrow. We think that a good religion and a powerful one that can spread is the one that offers a source of strength. And at least our side gives greater certainty. And this is powerful. Why? Because in our side, you feel that when there's a plan, you have a heavenly backup, ladies and gentlemen. That when you hear verses like that, you are fearfully made by God in His image, and He knows of you, even in the moment where you are still in your mother's womb. That gives a source of strength to people, that you can face adversity at the end of the day, and you can triumph over it. But secondly, we think that this is also about doing good, right? Because in your day-to-day life, when you are impoverished, there's a question of whether it is worth it to do good in your life. For most people, though, that there's always going to be temptation of sin, to be lying when you are going to interview, to be jealous to people who are rich, to be enraged with the condition that you live today. But at least with the certainty of a plan, you know that you can come victorious because God plans it for you until the very end of your life. We think that the comparative that happens in their side is that you continuously question your every single decision. Is it what God wants? Am I choosing the right plan? Is it not the right plan? You are trapped in a constant cycle of insecurity. That's what happened in their side. Finally, let's talk about your life in the future. We think it can be defined into two probability. Number one, if you're successful. Number two, if you end up in failure. Let's begin with success, right? Because in our side, we think that what you're going to think about is that this is God's word and this is purely His. It's about Him, not about you. Why is this so important? Because it prevents egoism, ladies and gentlemen. This is not what you have done, but this is what God has done. And this is more powerful for religion that way because it associates greatness with God rather than greatness with human. But most importantly, we think at that point you are much more likely to contribute back to your religion. Because when you are thinking about you are more likely to think that this is about God's plan and you want others to have the same opportunity to face such greatness and plan. That's when you contribute back to the religion. But lastly, let's talk about failure. Because I think people all agree that in an impoverished community, we can see most of the time people still end up in failure. It takes like 2 generations at least for it to be able to break down of poverty. We think that in both sides there are many cases in which we change nothing. But in our side it's much better. We think it's okay, right? Because at least when you have the comfort of a better plan, you know that at least you might go to heaven. That you have done the meaningful fight. That you can now return to the embrace of the Father. We think that this is better than the crushing nothingness that will be put by side government. We think at that point it's much more likely for you to feel content before you conflict.
Why wouldn't people hate God if they know that God's plan is for them to be suffering?
Because the preacher will continuously show examples of people who persevere, and even for those that failed, the preacher will show great imagery of how they are now rejoicing in heaven. Finally, economic empowerment and what you need. Meaning that if you would like to be economically empowered, you need 2 things. You need grit and you need innovation to go up the ladder. You need to work hard. You need to go to school even though you are at a disadvantage. You need to learn to innovate, to find something new, some form of things that can be economically powerful. We need having a plan and having a faith that God has the best plan for you. Give us certainty that something good will happen in your life. Why is this meaningful? Because it means that you don't give up in the process. Because people will give up inside government and government. They will question, are you going somewhere? Can anything change? Because there's always going to be a crushing weight of hopelessness when they see the same things again and again every single day. When they see failure happening again and again in their college application, right? We did that at the point, mortality was still high. But at least in the idea of the plan existing, you will push through because you know that God made great plans and not bad plans. And every action that you did matter because this is part of that great plan. It is likely for it to be like Jack Ma, for example, rejected from even serving in KFC, but he knows that his life matter and he ends up creating Alibaba. We need that people need drive and they need the will to innovate, and it's unlikely to happen if they think that they are unable to do anything, but when there's a heavenly backup, it's much more likely to do that. Ladies and gentlemen, why is Christianity powerful? Because God the Father made a plan, a gracious plan, where His only begotten Son sacrificed Himself on the cross to save us all. We think that a godly plan is important to secure the people, and that's what we brought to the opposition we probably oppose.
When you were a single mother of life in the slums of India, trying to eat out on your living, doing laundry of other people and begging at the street, it's not healthy for you to think that your trials and immense difficulties in life is a dictation of God. That this is something that God has planned in your course, in the course of your life, whether that leads to greatness or whether that leads to failure, that you experience it at all is what matters, ladies and gentlemen. We say that in the midst of such torturous poverty, two kinds of responses will happen depending on different aspects, right? Firstly, we think that there will either be an incitement of anger against the religion that puts you in this position, and the God that dictates the course of your life, or at their best case scenario, a sense of emotional placation that not only disables you from assessing correctly the quality of the choices that you have made throughout the course of your life and how you got here to begin with, but at best only gives you an idol in your head that you can turn to when you cry your heart out at night. When your stomach is rumbling and the babies attached to your breast suckle on your dry nipples. These are the kinds of damages that are not at all placated on their side of the house. Religious placation can only go so far, but the suffering still remains. Some more rebuttals before I move on to my extension. Firstly, I told you about how there's going to be self-blame, that these people are going to turn to depression, and so on and so forth. But this is a very unfair packaging, ladies and gentlemen. We think that in the event of a failure over the course of their lifetime, when they understand that that's not the dictation of God, it's going to be seen as something that's a wrong choice that they made, right? That is to say, they're going to be able to evaluate the choices that they made and whether or not it was correct to begin with, right? Comparatively, under their side of the house, what's going to happen is that they're going to see that this is God's plan for me, and I had no agency in this happening, and that's worse off under their side of the house. That's worse off under their side of the house. Second rebuttal, regarding comfort and how they told you that's exclusive under their side of the house. We don't think so, ladies and gentlemen, because we're not eradicating the entire concept of religion, right? That is to say, heaven and hell still exists, and you're still going to accrue the currencies of virtues and sins over the course of your lifetime. Therefore, the only difference is that the course of your worldly existence is the only thing that's in your hands. So when you're undergoing through severe periods of suffering, for example, that's still going to accrue as a virtue because of the virtue of suffering, for example, and that's still going to be rewarded with a place in the throne of heaven, for example, and that's still going to be better, and that's still going to exist under our side of the house. No, thank you. Lastly, right, upon their argument regarding the rags to riches and how this is an important canon in the Christian in religious theology in general. We think that the rags to riches stories that they're going to perpetuate under their side of the house is only the stories that's pertinent towards the involvement of God, towards the ordination of divine will, and thus of no agency of that person's own doing. Right? That's to say, we think that these kinds of stories will not lead to any empowerment towards that person that enables them to take action to change the course of their life, and that's a bad thing at the end of the day. I'm going to extend the case of Kuchok in two extensions. First, I'm going to talk about how this narrative empowers grassroots society to mobilize back to their side of the house. But secondly, I'm also going to talk about religion blaming and why that's a very harmful thing, especially for the people in the throes of poverty. First extension, regarding how this narrative empowers grassroots society to be able to mobilize. We know that the ideal condition for people in a state of poverty is that they must be able to have participation in the movements that surrounding them. Right? That is to say, they have to have discussions with their neighbors, for example. They have to turn up to elections to vote for the policies that they want. Right? We think that you have to understand these people live in very sympathetic conditions where they cannot even put food on the table for the next day, for example, and therefore social change is something that's very important for them. Right? We think that the problem currently is that society is placated by the notion that all their trials are ordained, and therefore there is no need for them to go out and seek social change because that's just some something that's going against the will of God. We think that the way that we can stop this is to give them a sense of agency, that though God is omniscient, He's not participative in the life that they are currently living. Therefore, in combating poverty, they must take matters into their own hands, ladies and gentlemen. They must become complicit to the movements that are currently existing in society instead of relying on a God's divine plan for them. And we don't think that that's the wisest course of action. No, thank you. What forms of participation are we talking about, ladies and gentlemen? We're talking about you having meetings with local movements instead of dormantly praying in the corner of a mosque, for example, ladies and gentlemen. Mothers seeking out advocacy from local NGOs for healthcare instead of just praying at their homes with their baby in their arms and just hoping that the divine will solve this entire problem. It's the small things. It's the small things, but we think that although it's marginal as a standalone benefit, collectively it's cumulative in nature. And when we're talking about religion, which is collectivist in nature, and that many people believe the same thing at once, it's something that can create a very monumental grassroots change at the end of the day. Second extension, but upon religion blaming and how that's bad for certain actors. Before that,
why is it that the plan from God cannot involve you being involved in politics, and how Jesus asked you to be involved in politics? Can that not be a plan?
Okay, sure. But we're talking about the grassroots society who are in throes of extreme poverty and to whom this kind of access is very limited, right? So therefore, the only way for you to inspire them to participate in politics is exactly to tell them that your participation is necessary in order to change the course of your lifetime. Otherwise, you're just going to succumb to the narrative that God has already planned your place for you, and that's something that's going to harm them at the end of the day. Second extension, regarding religious beliefs, right? We know that you have to understand that these actors are a very specific subset of society. They endure a torturous experience of poverty, and they live in constant dilemmas of whether or not they're going to be able to eat food the next day or support their families. We think that in such torturous conditions, there's a very large swath of society who will not accept this kind of destiny from their God, and thus they will become vindictive towards their God. They will turn to blame, ladies and gentlemen. And we think that this is something that's going to violate the benefit under their side of the house, and it's going to bring comfort, because they're not going to be comforted by an evil God that's not going to bring them comfort at all, right? But the most important thing, ladies and gentlemen, is that this can even lead them to exit entirely out of the religion, and we think that religion in particular is a very important thing for these people in immense poverty, because you do need that comfort at the end of the day. So what they are losing under their side of the house is not only the comfort for the people in the throes of poverty who are still within that religion, but also now people may not even have any sort of comfort at all in the throes of poverty, and that's a very bad thing when you're living in impoverished conditions. Based on all of these reasons, we are so proud. Super proud.
I'm going to point out one important flaw and one important concession that has to be made within this debate. We think that if it's about whether or not preachers are able to make sure that people do not just lay around and work hard, we think that's not the different problem of whether or not God is omnipotent or not, but the method of preaching. Because we think that in terms of the Quran, where the verse that tells you to get knowledge and tells you to work hard is the second most said verse after basic faith in itself, is the fault of the strategy of the preaching to begin with to not highlight that verse. So it's not an inherent problem of whether or not God is omnipotent. What's the consequence of that? Knowing that the preaching strategies already exist, how can society absorb their teaching better in a context that they are living in a high-pressure society? Even I, within JOVED, is already stepped out. I cannot imagine how these people would feel every day within impoverishment. So we think that it's important about how people absorb these kinds of teaching. And that's the first thing I'm going to talk about. Let's acknowledge that people live in a very society in which capitalism has made sure that any kind of attempt that they make to work harder would fail, because it's impossible for you, for instance, to suddenly go out and the riches. So we think that what's the consequence of that? You will have a lot of failures. And it means that the idea of evaluation coming from Adam does not work. Because every time that you fail, you evaluate and you fix yourself, but in the next day you still have the same problems happening over and over again. It makes you more depressed, ladies and gentlemen. And we think that in terms of making sure that you are able to work hard in the future, for a lot of people, it's about how to survive, it's about your mental health, whether or not you can keep up with all of the things that are happening. What are more likely to happen on that side of the house? we think that people would tend to forget that they have the option of heaven or hell. People would often tend to forget that the return might still be long in the future, because a lot of times and the stories that God have made and laid out plans for you, the return, like Yusuf for instance, only get the return later and later after that. But the moment that the preacher tells that it is within your responsibility and within your control, it was an immense burden towards the Muslim people that is within your ability to make sure that you can able to work hard. What's going to happen is that you will overextend and overthink within their efforts, because they forget about all of the returns that can happen in the future. And this is very important burden, ladies and gentlemen, because Western societies cannot do it. We also think that in terms of, for instance, elections, as Adam have pointed out to you, we think that with the condition that a lot of times politics right now are very toxic, that a lot of times people would just lose hope, because me, within my capacity, have no ability to make sure that, the elites within the politics will hear me. But the thing about having laid out God's plan is that every time you do it, even though you might fail, even though the odds are against you, you always feel that there might be a hope in the future. And this is something that's important and does not exist at all on their side of the house. That's why we think that it's important. But the second thing that I will talk about is Adam's argument about how there is going to be a notion of an imperfect, a notion that religion is imperfect. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we think that it's really important for us to notice that their side of the house, the notion of imperfection of religion becomes much worse. Because God is not perfect at all to the point that He has no control whatsoever of what happens in the future. We think that in terms of, for instance, people still being poor in the status quo, people that say that God has laid out a plan can always argue that a lot of times the lessons learned and the references are already existing, but you just simply don't understand because God already explained it. And the returns in heaven or hell, for instance, is something that's a viable return for this particular individual. But the moment when God is actually not perfect, that God does not know what will exactly happen in the future, that's the perfect attack that for atheists, for instance, or other parties that want to delegitimize religion within impoverished communities, because it means that it's already in line it's already in line, and it's all basically a concession about free will, which is what, like, a lot of times the main thesis of atheism, right? Why do you need to have free will but rely on God? God has done nothing to you, and you have to have that free will. Just go with us because it's practically the same, ladies and gentlemen. So in their side of the house, they create no benefit at all, and it creates more hatred, ladies and gentlemen. We also think that even if in that side of the house, people still go towards this religion, we think that, for instance, potentials of abuse would become worse. Why? Because we think that the moment that God is seen as imperfect and the decisions that you make is the most important thing, and God does not have it laid out and planned for you to begin with, we think that the opportunity for other religions that has this particular kind of strategy to come in and influence people would be much worse in a bad way. Why is that the case? Because they would always say that other religious leaders that might have bad motives, that simply want to make sure that the poor people do not hurt up, but just support them no matter what, or like Mother Teresa in the past, for instance, have much stronger narrative to say that your decisions at the end of the day need to be influenced by me, because I'm the perfect complement of God, ladies and gentlemen. And this is something that's particularly important because it doesn't exist in the status quo. Because when God is the one that is perfect and God is the one that has laid out plans for you, the meaning of that is that you can work hard as possible, but the way that you engage with religion is simply that you pray and hope that what you have given is something that God already planned for you, and it's something that might accrue later in the future or might accrue in heaven and hell. But what happens on that side of the house is religions become also integrated towards what you do, right? And this is influencing people to simply follow a religious leader or simply follow religion no matter what, because the decisions that they make will feel that they are simply doing it because the religion tells them so, because other religious leaders tell so, because they are the perfect complement to go. But in the end of the day, what's the comparative on our side of the house? We think that knowing that self-blame is a very important, is a very huge problem in status quo. We think that it's a more important urgency on our side of the house. We don't see why in particular their side of the house have any urgency, because we think that religion as an omnipotent God also teachings to be to work hard can exist hand in hand in the end of the day. So what have I told you? Number one, I've told you that we need to make sure that people have capacity to work hard because of the pressure that they have. Number two, why we think that most religion would be much worse on that side of the house. We're very proud to oppose.
I'll answer two questions in this debate. One, will the choices that people make when we use this narrative be able to help them get out of poverty when we give them the choice of agency as a role that they should play? And secondly, which side would retain people in the religion and not tarnish the exercise of that religion? But before that, I would like to give two clarifications. One, opposition team here cannot spell out each variable and different sources of religion that points out to different actions and manifestations of God's plan. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about the preaching method in the very first place. We're talking about whether we want to do what they want, which is totally all God's plan and everything is acceptable as God's plan, or us, where we want to make sure that God's plan always manifests in different choices of different human beings in accordance to what's most beneficial for them, right? So if at the end of the day they want to say that God's plan ordained you to be a person who suffer, most likely the preachers won't emphasize on the stories of rags to riches as they want to talk about, right? So that's a benefit that they cannot claim. The second clarification that I would like to make is that the assurance of going to heaven is not part of this debate. That is determined by sins or the pahala or the karma that you racked up so long as that you're in earth. On both sides, there will be the same assurances of you going to heaven. The important debate here is the short-term reactions that humans do. When they feel a lot of suffering, when they feel a lot of physical pain, emotional and mental pain, what do? They turn to sin more by doing, for example, things that in the short term alleviate their pain, like suicide, become more radical because they think that there's the only way to salvation, to get themselves to salvation, or they go out of the religion because they hate the religion so much, since every plan that they see is the way to suffrage, right? Or at the end, they hurt themselves by staying complicit to the suffering of them and the people who rely on them at the end of the day. Their daughters, their wives, their people who actually still rely on them for economic profit. Or will they react that they don't lose hope, that they know maybe God has a different end for them in a different choice? Not seeing God as an evil being that only indicts them to a life of suffering, but a being that gives them the ability to choose. I'll talk about two things. One, will people make choices that helps them get out of poverty when we give them agency? So, opposition here mainly talks about two things. That one, poverty is so structured so that evaluations will be useless because they will keep on failing. And secondly, heaven will seem far off because people won't understand, hence not believing in the message. Firstly, on poverty being structured, I don't think they have sufficiently proved that. All we see is platitudes of how capitalism is bad, but they haven't proved why they have no serious choice of an individual choice to get out of poverty in the very first place. As there be a structure that is very oppressive, there's things that the individual can do. We've told you several things. That this person can be an activist, as suffering as that may be, there is a necessary way out of an oppressive structure. Or secondly, they could not choose a business that have failed them for so long just in accordance of faith that, oh, it's okay for me to choose this not trendy business because God has a plan for me in the future for this business, right? That's a really bad choice that these people shouldn't take. They should have chosen other things, such as being an accountant, for example, that gives you better salaries rather than opting for a business that is volatile in the very first case. No thanks. But secondly, look, let's see what they want, right? These people who are impoverished, what they want these people to do. They want these people to go the extra mile and stay on in the decisions that made them impoverished in the very first place. I'm not sure that's really good for these people in the very first place. You're making the religion a tool for them to become even more suffering, right? That's really, really bad. But thirdly, if the problem is structure, we gave you the solution of making these people more motivated to destroying that structure, right? There's no mechanism at all for on opposition side to get out of this structural poverty. No thanks. Secondly, heaven will seem far off. People won't understand, right? I have two responses to this. One, this completely misses the point of proposition's argument. Because we aren't promising that people at the end of the day, if they choose the right choices, that they will go to heaven. We are promising that if you try and exercise different choices, you might get to different success points. And that's what God is telling you, right? So the rebuttal that suddenly people will trust in that choices because heaven is so far off doesn't work. Because the end is more short-term than the one that they try to portray. No thanks. But secondly, if heaven will truly feel very, very far off, look at what they're proposing. What they're proposing is that God's plan is maybe for you to suffer so much here in order for you to gain heaven or hell in the very future, right? That means at the end of the day, their side will be the one where people have a mass exodus out of the religion because they don't feel that the benefit of heaven or hell is relatable to them with the short-term pain they are currently experiencing. We don't think that's effective. Yes?
Do you think children in Sierra Leone who eat diamonds with their bare hands until their fingertips can suddenly feel okay and have all your plain choices?
Yeah, they don't feel okay, but on your side, they will feel okay anyways, right? Because the material pain that they're experiencing is not good. By the way, we're not talking about children in Sierra Leone. Most probably we're talking about the people who can access this preaching in the first place. So those extreme examples don't happen in this debate, right? Secondly, which side will retain people in the religion and not tarnish the exercise of the religion, right? They say that atheists will hold up the messages of choice because God will be seen as imperfect. But we never told you that our messages means that God is imperfect, right? We always what we tell you is the choices that these people make is imperfect, and God's plan based on those choices have led them to that. God is still perfect. It's just that your choices haven't been in accordance with the perfection of God. So that is something that is of the value of this. And the last thing that they say is about egoism, that you would give back to the religion in the future, right? One, I don't think this is the perfect target because these are people who are impoverished in the very first place. I'm not sure what these people will be able to give back. But secondly, look, people will give back anyways if they suddenly lead to success because on our side, they still rely on the narrative of God. What they haven't tackled, however, is the violent reactions that people might have. That they might lose hope in the face of a God's plan that doesn't provide them with any material short-term benefit. That they might run to if they believe so much to radicalism and terrorism in order for them to gain salvation, or they may run out of religion, or they may engage in suicide or further killings. That is a bad plan at the end of the day that they haven't engaged, and it will be too late if the third speaker engages in that. We're very proud.
I'm going to close the case of opposition by talking about three things. One, what does God's plan actually mean? Second of all, what is the best strategy for a preacher to preach a certain doctrine? Lastly, how do we develop recovery community? First of all, let's talk about what does God's plan actually mean. The biggest claim that comes under government was to say that it means that you have to succumb to everything God gives to you, and that implies that God is evil, and so on and so forth. Let's actually contrast with this example. What does the features God's plan have once and for all? Two things. Number one, God's plan is mysterious, but it is reliant on the assumption of good faith. Let's take a case study of Islam. Islam is a religion that has the doctrine of God's plan, but in which one of the pillars is Qadar and Qadar, in which God knows your faith from your birth until you die. But at the same time, the Quran and the Hadith is very multi-interpreted and poetic at the same time. And this is the job of the religious people to uncover their religious mysteries themselves, ladies and gentlemen. It dictates that the end goal of a certain people has been defined in life. But at the same time, the religion and the doctrine also guides you on to what are the specifics you should do to achieve and come to this mysterious conclusion in the most ideal form at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen. So it is not completely like what they say, ladies and gentlemen. So the question becomes, why would the guidance be good under our side? It's simply because of two reasons. Number one, it's simply because God is good, ladies and gentlemen. Take a case study of Islam. One of the core tenets and core characteristics of Allah is that it is Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. That will love you, and have the best plan for you, regardless of what you do, ladies and gentlemen. And we argue that it is simply just not intuitive for us to assume that an omnibenevolent God who loves you and cares for you means that God will leave you to suffer, ladies and gentlemen. That is a very unlogical conclusion. conclusion that they come under their side. But second of all, this is the reason as why Ilham's context becomes very important. Because note that in this debate, we are speaking as the preacher, ladies and gentlemen. And as the preacher, we have the autonomy to dictate the specific strategies we should do in proliferating our religion, ladies and gentlemen. We only have the burden to prove that why God's plan is good. It is within our autonomy to choose on what we should frame the God's plan as. As long as we can do that, as long as we can do preach that God's plan implies that all of the good things will come in the end, but we have to work hard for it. It will be, it will also bring a benefit under our side. Before I go to my second feature, sure.
If people also get emphasized on their agency on your side, why does the harm of people blaming themselves not happen on your side?
Okay, I'm going to explain to you that on my second part. Let's go to the second feature first. It amplifies your confidence in exercising your self-agency, ladies and gentlemen. This also relates to the argument that Adam has given you. Because we argue that in the instances in which you have the narrative of certainty, that is time that you will become desperate, ladies and gentlemen. If I as a chemistry student knows that I will completely fuck up on my student life, I will have incentive to study at all. But in the instances in which I realize that there is a likelihood for me to be successful as a chemistry student and not just stress out I want to move to another university, that is another additional incentive for me to work hard, ladies and gentlemen. We think that this enables people to exercise their self-agency in the most maximum manner. The implication of this is that all of this means that God's plan will be a win-win solution. At the best case, you will be successful in your endeavors simply because you have worked hard to do so. But lastly, even if you fail, at least you still have the closure that the afterlife will be good, ladies and gentlemen. After all of those problems you have suffered, after all of those things you have suffered as an individual, heaven will be good and it will be good eternally. The first question goes to us. Secondly, let's talk about what is the best strategy for preachers to preach a certain doctrine. An important framework in this, an important framework of thinking in this debate, is that this debate should not only assume that people following open-theism versus people following the God plans doctrine. It should also discuss how do we make people believe in the doctrine to begin with. This is the reason as why Ilham's context becomes very important, because it brings two things. Number one, he argued that we will be lambasted by skeptics. These are the kinds of atheists that will continuously spread doubt to these poor people that our religion and our doctrine is not legit. As a response to this, Derril said that people will see God as perfect anyway. But note that this relates to the mainstream perception that people have in God right now. And the mainstream perception is that God is ultimately good, ultimately benevolent, and ultimately knowing, ladies and gentlemen. We think that the counter narrative is not as strong under their side. But secondly, and this is unresponded, is simply because the idea of open-theism is foreign in those underdeveloped communities to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. Note that the traditional views in life of the traditional religion that they currently own, for example, are the ones that dictate God's plan. We think that all of these things mean that people will be even more conflicted at the end of the day. What is the importance of all this discussion? Just like what Adam said, the thing we must take into consideration is the insecurity and suffering of people facing. Thus, the methods to which we should teach a certain doctrine must not exponentiate their stress, ladies and gentlemen. And this is kind of hard that happen under opposition side. Because under opposition side, we have a bunch of people that are stressed out in their life and at the same time have conflicting ideas that are alien to them, being doctrinized by a certain teacher, and at the same time, these ideas is the one that teach that their suffering is their own fault, ladies and gentlemen. We argue that at the end of the day, it will not be meaningful, and we argue that at the end of the day, it will not be meaningful. What is comparative under government, under opposition? Our comparative, we give assurance, certainty, and comfort, ladies and gentlemen, that we must fight, but at the end, it will all be worth it. This leads to two benefits. Number one, more people will follow our religion simply because the doctrine is more populous and more sexy to believe on. And secondly, more people will get more spiritual enlightenment, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm sorry to say that in the worst case in which people do get good, it is okay. Because realize that we don't have massive power as a religious creature. What we can do right now is to only give assurances to those poor people and those people in the underdeveloped community that you can give, that you can experience a good life in the instances in which you go to heaven on the principle of God's plan. So the second question goes to us. Lastly, let's talk about how we best develop underdeveloped and impoverished community. Three key layers. Number one is fighting, two key layers. Number one is fighting oppression and economic empowerment. Note that all of this is contingent to the previous two passions. And in a sense, I have stated before that people do have incentive to fight oppression, that people do have incentive to be smart and to be gritty on their economic empowerment. This benefit is not mutually exclusive. benefits at all. But second and most importantly, that's our emotional closure. Because Adam effectively stated that people will hate religion outside the house. Now, let's just use the intuitive logic here. Which side? Well, in which side people will hate religion more? Is it the side in which you are forced to be born in this world, not knowing when, but ladies and gentlemen, and at the same time you are forced to live a shitty life, or under our side, in which even if you have a shitty life, at least God has prepared something that is good for you. On our side, we win this debate.
Three things that I would like to talk about in my speech. Number one, how does God's plan look like? Number two, what will this plan do to the life of impoverished people? And thirdly, how do you get economic empowerment? Let's begin with how does God's plan look like? Because what we have characterized to you is that it is not self-defeating, it is not naturalistic, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, it has mystery, but it offers something greater. Either betterment in earth or the glories of heaven. And this is important, ladies and gentlemen. Because note, the effort is not forgotten in the process of achieving all that. The stories that I told you, tales of King David and of Joseph, the Quran parables brought by Ilham Kushay, these are people who do the plan, but these are people who don't just lie and sleep but try. They follow the plan, and the plan includes being part of God's granted effort in which He back you up. As Ilham said, is you preach well to guarantee that the message is gotten across within the plan, therefore, to be inclusive towards these people, offering something greater, but not just lying around doing nothing. Now let's move to what will this plan do to their life. First, let's talk about blame, right? Because they argue that it's likely that you're just going to blame religion. We question why won't this happen in their side as well? Why won't their people also think that this is all just one big unfairness, as Kushay said, that God made the condition like this, that He gave free will, but look at where that free will brought us an impoverished condition that you just can't get out of, right? What is our comparative here? It is that, as I said, that this is not your fault, ladies and gentlemen. That this is part of the plan that God created. And as a plan, it is therefore never your fault, so you never need to self-blame yourself. And why is this important? Because they themselves also don't prove in their side. Why is it so easy to be better in your life tomorrow? Why is it so easy to suddenly rise up the ranks and suddenly see things improving day by day? We did that at that point. It is better to associate the bad things in your life with a plan created by a benevolent God, and then just blaming yourself for your inadequacy and thinking you should have done more, regretting the things that you did not do in the past, and thinking whether or not you could do something better in tomorrow, but you still cannot do so. At least in our side, there's a plan, and you are sure of it. Secondly, we talked about hope, ladies and gentlemen, because it is important that you do not know whether things will get better, but at least in our side, the security is there. If you fail, there's another day which God promised you in which you can achieve betterment. But that's not what the worst is, right? Because I think we need to deal with the fact that some people just don't get out of poverty. In our case, we offer heaven. And they don't just get out of this and say that, oh well, if people do good things in their life, they will just enter heaven anyway. Because for some people, they want this enjoyment. Because as they say themselves, why will people just commit suicide? Why will people just steal if the burden of economy is that powerful to them? Why care, ladies and gentlemen? And we answer that question. You care because you know that there's a knowledge of you, that there's a plan in which God has cared for you before, and therefore it offers you a hope that there's something greater at the end of the day. This is what forces you to stay in the right track, because there's a promise of something greater. Thirdly, we talk about religious opponents, because they claim that atheism cannot neutralize this, because God is still perfect. Why will He? As we explained to you in our side, you can't ultimately be good and almighty and all-knowing if you don't know what will happen to your people's future, or even care on what happens to them, and leave them behind to make choices in which they fail at the end of the day. And this is why it will still be utilized by religious opponent, and in people who are impoverished, it is the most easiest target. Lastly, how to get economic empowerment. Both sides would like to have economic empowerment. They want their people to vote, they want their people to organize. We would like to have that, but the main question is how to pursue this, right? Because that's what we answer. We say that we need grit, ladies and gentlemen. But if you are poor, you are much more likely to just give up, right? Because you think that the crushing weight is always there, and we do those things every day, but there is nothing that changes. You will not do that in our side, because you think that the plan that God created to you is a good plan, and you have to stick with the plan. That's why your grit is there, and the likeliness to change and the motivation for change is much more accepting. And those we soon probably goes.
Three things that I'd like to discuss in this slide. First, I settle the issue of how the narrative looks like in the eyes of force. Second, I'll talk about why accepting conditions will translate to benefit in the event where they are still impoverished. Lastly, I'll talk about the economic empowerment. So let's proceed to the first one. What does narrative of poor would look like, right? This is an important issue where side of opposition always said that like there's a good light that these poor people actually would see, right? They rely their case of benefit so much in saying that you will still preach good stories about life, for example, Jesus being politics or rags to rich, and people would listen to it. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not engaging with our portrayal of how impoverished people looks like, ladies and gentlemen. What are we going to say? We say that in order for all opposition's benefit, for example, sense of security to actually be received by these people, you have to go to the extreme extent for these poor people. That means you should tell them that God's plan to make you poor is always good, ladies and gentlemen, because you should enjoy it, ladies and gentlemen. So they would not receive like things that is like good stories, but what you should be justified is like your kind of impoverishment is what God's good plan is, right? If not, people would still be scared and feel like their situation is not joy but oppression. That isn't a God's plan if God is good and bad God is the true power. So this is why our narrative is most likely the one that plays in. When preachers are making arguments that your life and the past are most likely bad, that's how you should receive this karma, for example, or things like, for example, you should be actually cherishing this kind of impoverishment because that's what because materialistic thing is not actually what is right? The only rebuttals coming inside of our proposition was that to say that it's always going to be in a good faith, but this does not actually engage us still. Why? Because good faith definition doesn't mean that it's good in material example. Because if that is so, that means all their argument with sense of security cannot play. Because you need to reach that point of good life in life first in order for you to get all the sense of security benefit. That means in most of their cases, that cannot be defended at all, ladies and gentlemen. And an argument that should play is outside of all the benefits cannot play. But let's proceed to the second thing. Why accepting conditions will translate into benefit in the event where they are impoverished, right? In such opposition, the only thing that they said is that it's good because it gives you a sense of security. We've already paid off in so many ways. Firstly, we tell you that it's not actually worth it when the kind of benefit that you'd receive is under oppression or like continuously being oppressed. That materially or pragmatically you still have to start the exam and you can't maximally pray to your God. But more than that, ladies and gentlemen, we tell you this is the root of radicalism and suicide bomb, for example, that have never been rebutted by side of opposition. We rebutted the idea of comfort or sense of security when we tell you that the benefit of comfort is only to stay in that religion, and ladies and gentlemen, we tell you that most people will not stay in that religion because God is seen as oppressor. The only rebuttal that comes from side of opposition was that to say, no, when outside is going to be worse because heaven is in the light of, in their side is going to be better because heaven is in the light of tunnel. We told you, ladies and gentlemen, heaven would still exist in our side of the house because morality is not going to be changed. But we told you even worse in their side of the house. Heaven would still so far away, ladies and gentlemen, because you have to undergo so much oppression to begin with, right? Therefore, the kind of comfort will not happen. But all our harms that we told you, such as radicalism and things like being oppressed continuously, would happen. The only but then they try to argue about like things like suffering, right? In order to minimize the harms that they would receive. We told you that it's okay for you to be self-linked, but there are other channels, ladies and gentlemen, that self-link would not happen. This leads me, this is exactly why we think the second class won by us. But this also leads me to the last class about like economic empowerment, which actually side of opposition concede that it's important to alleviate these people's condition, but never have they proved why precisely in their side of the house it's going to be better happen. Side of opposition only argue like this. You do not need to self-evaluate because poverty is so structured, ladies and gentlemen. In our side of the house, we tell you many things. Why even though it's structured, there are still access, for example, especially it's already expanded, for example. That if you actually say that hard work is not limited, ladies and gentlemen, because sometimes your own decision are because of your impoverishment, ladies and gentlemen, you are going to be actually success in life. Therefore, economic empowerment most likely happen in the outside of the house, ladies and gentlemen. In this side of the house, more people are trapped to think that they cannot do anything in their impoverishment. That means no more economic empowerment, right? That means all the three classes go to the side of the house.